And I think it's interesting with unconditional love in that it doesn't mean that we don't have standards. It doesn't mean that you get to treat me however, say I love you, and then treat me like crap. It doesn't mean those things. It just means that if we start from that place, that you have this inherent worth on this earth. We come with love. We come from love. So when my first one left, we started already in the fall of high school senior year. And I said, hey, kiddo, I'm going to always be your mama. You're going to always be my kid. So we're not going to be peers, but you're an emerging adult. Our relationship's going to shift and change. So what kind of version do we want to co-create together? We have this idea that the time that we have left on this earth is unknown, combined with life is fragile, equals do it now.
I'm Art Blanchford, and this is Life in Transition. Welcome back to the Life in Transition podcast. I am very excited today, and you'll find out even especially excited why. The guest I have today is Hanna Bankier, who is the Birdie launcher. She's helping mamas spread their wings as their little ones leave the nest. And the reason, Hanna, you don't even know this, the reason I'm even especially excited to have you today was this is the first day that my wife and I are empty nesters. Today. Yesterday, we moved our 24-year-old son into his new apartment, and the younger ones have already left, and he is completely on his own now and gone. And the first time I've driven a U-Haul and hauled furniture in a long time.
In a long time.
With a bunch of his friends.
What serendipitous timing.
Yeah, I was thinking about that with our podcast today. I was like, wow, this is pretty cool.
Exciting times for sure.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So jumping right in, Hanna, what would you consider, and we'll have the time, I think we'll work our way back to this, but what would you consider for yourself to be one of the biggest transitions that you've been through? Most meaningful, most transformational?
It is interesting. I consider myself to be a little bit of a transition ninja by now, because it's been several of those major life transitions that are just like, oh, life is now going this direction, or this is happening. And as I'm reflecting on it, I believe that coming to the U.S. as an immigrant in my early 20s really was the one that led all the other life transitions to be happening. So I would start there. It was my first major shift in identity and major shift in, okay, this is different. Now what do I do?
That is a very big shift. Moving, not just going to, but moving to a foreign country at a very young age. You said it was a major shift in identity. What does that mean to you, that it has shifted your identity?
I'm from Sweden, and I feel very Swedish. I'm very rooted in the language and the culture. You know, my family of origin are still there. So coming to the U.S., coming to California in my early 20s, I lost a lot of my footing. So I left, my country, my language, my family, my job, my friends, my apartment, all of these things for a glorious adventure. Moving for love is a great reason to move anywhere. And so it was a very, very exciting time. And English is not my first language. I am all of a sudden not as funny as I think that I am normally, or as I was in Swedish.
But thank you for pointing that out. I think a lot of people that haven't lived in another culture, they don't realize that's the one. There's two things that I felt like I really gave up. The biggest one, the most difficult, is trying to tell a joke, or even just understanding how to communicate in the other language. And then the second is just the small talk, like the immediate little small talk, like there's something going on and there's, what is exactly the right word to use in that situation? And it really, the first time I lived in a foreign country, I felt more lonely because of that. I couldn't make the connections with whatever the little situation is on the bus from the plane to the airport.
Yeah.
Right. So I appreciate that you point that out. It's not that you're not as funny, but you don't have the words, so you don't come across to others because you don't have the words to make it be appropriate to have some humor in that situation.
Right. Yeah. So my personality shifted because I didn't have access to language the same way. I'm a really fast talker, and now I've been here, a long minute, over 25 years. So I figured out my pace again. But in the beginning, that was not the case. So I didn't come across, or I didn't feel as confident in my humor and how smart I am and what I had to offer. And definitely limping along, as an ESL speaker. And then another big shift was also just these cultural references.
Yes.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you don't know home runs and the bases are
Right.
loaded and all this
In
stuff,
the U.S.
right?
is a lot around baseball. And the baseball is, as much as you all talk about it being World Series, I'm like, there's 3 countries in the world playing baseball. If we're talking soccer or, some sport that actually is played globally, let's talk about the world anything. But so there was the
and the World Series only has 2 countries in it,
right? Even smaller, but somehow it's the world. Yes. So that, interestingly, right, there's these cultural references, or if, TV series hadn't moved across the Atlantic and made it onto Swedish television, I don't know. There is music. There was an artist, I can't even remember whom, for the longest time. I'm like, is that just made up? Is that a real person? And everyone's like, you don't know whoever it is. I'm like, I have no clue what you're talking about.
Right.
So that was, I think that shift really, and that transition coming to the U.S., deciding to stay and make new friends, make a new life, make a new home. My boyfriend grew up here, so he was at home. And I was like, okay, so how do I find my people? What's my village in this? And so that was a big, big transition.
So it's interesting when I hear you then, Hanna. It's not that there was like some core identity that you identified with that changed, but everything that made up the multifacets of what you felt at that age was your identity. All of it, language, the way you talk, your family, friends, where you're from, all of it changed enough significantly that you weren't quite sure who you were.
Yeah. And also because in Sweden, I had worked in television already. So I saw myself as a professional. And then I got here and I initially came on a student visa. So I became a college student. But I was already in my early 20s. So most people had already done their BAs. So I'm older and I have a different thing, but I am not as fluent. And I went to school to do a degree in broadcasting communication arts. And so I had lived experience because I had worked in the field, but I hadn't done the schooling for it. So it was a lot of like, how do I show up? What's my value? Who am I in all of this? It was, it was a little soup of emotion going on there.
And so this is what, 25 years ago or so? And what's a big learning that you had from that now looking back? What would you say was a big learning out of that transition? Were you able to find out more who you were, or did you suffer a long time in trying to be somebody that you weren't, like trying to find or trying to make an identity more than find it?
I think a little bit of both, but what is one of the unique things about the American culture that I really appreciate is this idea that you can reinvent yourself. So in a sense, it's freeing, right? Nobody knows who I am. So I can show up and explore facets of myself or put forth things that might not have been as welcome or as easy in my old setting, because then there was already an expectation of who is Hanna and what does it come with? And now I'm like, oh, well, I can flex this muscle or I can try this out. And which version of me, which persona, if you will, not to go into facading, but just an opportunity to try out new things. So I think that's my biggest learning that I've taken with me in all the consequent transitions in my life. It's just, okay, yes, there's a sense of loss and there's a sense of uncertainty and being unsettled. And what's the opportunity here?
Right. Yeah, so you're definitely a glass half full person. I mean, just by the way you say that, right? The amount of energy in your voice when you talk about the loss compared to you talk about the opportunity. It's
it's a both and. I think everything is both and.
That's for sure.
Just being able to have two, thoughts in your head at the same time and not getting attached to one of them. That is the right way. No, that is a way. And then there's other ways, and what is there for you to explore. And I mean, in my early 20s, I probably wouldn't have spoken about it this way because I wouldn't have felt as confident in continuously feeling I'm landing on my feet and I'll figure it out. And I also, that was 25 years ago. So I've grown a lot since then. Lots of other subsequent life transitions have allowed me to explore and be excited about it.
So you're giving up a very, very important thing, which was your whole community. and everything that you knew. But with that also came the letting go of the expectations of that community as well, so that you were more free to see who you were outside of the expectations of what other people had about you.
For sure. And in conjunction with that, I'm obviously not the same person I was when I was 25. So not all of those folks would have been with me even if I'd stayed in the same location.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. As we move, as we grow, as we explore, different people will stay with us and other people were no longer a good fit. Doesn't make anybody a good or a bad person. It's just like, okay, here we are a good fit. And then some shift is happening and then not all of them will stay with you.
Right. No, for sure. For sure. And that's okay. I'm wondering, like, in that, like, when you got to flex new muscles, when you got to see yourself in a completely new environment, what did you find out about yourself that surprised you?
The resilience. I think of the all the things that I was missing then, right? We're talking pre-cell phones. We're talking
right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Pre-FaceTime,
right? Very expensive phone calls back home, 9-hour time difference. There was no, there's barely email. So
your community was much more local then than it is now. I mean, you could, like my daughter's in school in Scotland and I'm spending an hour a day with her on the phone, on FaceTime. Nice. So we still have a very tight community, which we wouldn't have had 25 years ago.
No,
right?
It wouldn't have been possible, right? Technology has allowed for that closeness in a way that wasn't possible back then. And then, really relying on these things that I bring that are my strengths. Like I'm an extrovert. I'm super outgoing. I do not have a problem striking up a conversation, much to my kids' chagrin these days. They're like, Mom, you don't have to talk to everybody. And I'm like,
you don't get that.
Yes.
Can we go now? That's what I always get. Can we go now?
And I was like, no, but the little connections, knowing the guy who sells flowers down the street, going to my local bookstore, saying hi, having these, created my own village, right? Yes. I left my village the way that it was formed back home in Sweden. I got here, and who are the people I want to surround myself with? Who are my chosen family? Who's my village now? And especially having kids, none of my husband nor I had any family out here. So they're all in Europe, and we're like, okay, we're not meant to do this on our own. We need a village. Absolutely. We need our people. And especially when my boys were young, my husband was on the road 7 to 10 days a month. I'm working
and he's from Europe as well?
Yeah, his family is from Europe. So he grew up here in California, but they had all moved back.
Okay.
So, so I'm sitting there, home alone with 2 little boys with a husband that's gone 7 to 10 days a month. And I'm like, okay.
Right.
So that's when I started Fab Ladies. And
okay. Already then. Okay.
Yeah, because I couldn't leave the house, right? The boys are asleep. But I needed my girls. I needed my women in my life. I needed community. So I created Fab Ladies and just said, you know what? We're going to meet after the boys are in bed. Come over at 8:00, have a glass of wine, and just sit and share. And that shared wisdom and hearing from moms going through something, and especially the ones that have kids that are a couple years older, and just like, okay, how to do it, how not to do it, and who do I want to surround myself with, and just creating that village on my own. Yeah,
but good for you, Hanna, for being so intentional about that. Because a lot of people in your situation, there's a need, and everybody has a need. Some people don't recognize it. Some people recognize it, don't do anything about it. And then you're in the third category, recognize it and do something about it, like to be really intentional, to say, hey, I have a need. And instead of, sitting at home and having a pity party, I'm going to reach out and create the life. This is the life that I have, and I'm going to make the best of it that I can. So good for you for creating that community. Where you could have, authentic connection, authentic community, which I think is so, so important.
It is so important. I mean, there's this quote that comes to mind for me, like, life isn't about finding ourselves. It's about creating ourselves. So this is what I need. I will be a better mom. I'll be a better wife. I'll be a better person. I'll be a better boss at work. I will be better off when I feel that I have the support. And then what within this very constricted bubble. Like, what are the means that I have?
Right.
I'm like, I have a couple of bottles of wine and I have, 15 girlfriends. So
Right.
let's bring it together and make that, the Muhammad and the mountain, like I was like, all right, invite them and see who shows up. And it's over 10 years. We've been going over 10 years.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I love what you said there too, because this is another area where people fall down a lot. As you said, what can I do? What, okay, this is the situation. What can I do? Not complain about it and not, we have the wrong president or we have the wrong weather or whatever, right? Things you can't do anything about, which a lot of people spend a lot of time talking about. You said, hey, what can I do? Well, I've got a couple bottles of wine. I've got some friends. Let's bring them together, right? This is something that's inside of my control to create the life that I want to have, not just complain about not having the one I want or not having the circumstances that I want.
Yes, that. I mean, I think it's crucial is the more we complain about something, the more energy we put towards it. So the bigger that becomes, right? So there's that. So complaining in and of itself is really not helpful. Sometimes we need to vent, but then we vent and then we're over.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
Sort of flush it through our bodies and then we move on. And then this other piece of what is within my control. And often we have so much more choice than we think.
Say a little bit more about that. Like, give an example of where that's true for you.
As moms, as women, we're being quite socialized in how we're supposed to be. There's this expectation of, being there for everybody and everything. And oftentimes especially when you're in this hands-on momming years of your life, which is for many of us is about 2 decades, which means that's usually 2-3 decades before, and then probably 3-4 decades after. And it becomes this very, very important time in our lives. And it truly is. And we probably often then find ourselves at the bottom of the laundry basket. And
as far as taking care of ourselves,
we don't have time for that. We don't have time. Yes, and as my offer, do you or do you choose not to? And every time occurs when we make a choice, then there's something else we're choosing not to do. So to giving ourselves the allowance to say, you know what? I am actually not going to be the president of PTA this year.
Right.
Because I am instead going to do this thing.
Right.
And those are these choices. I am choosing to not spend time with people that are draining my energy. I am choosing to spend time with people that are filling my cup.
Right. I
have a choice. Will people on the receiving end of that choice love it? Maybe, maybe not.
And that's okay. I mean, daring
Probably
to disappoint.
None of my business.
That's right. That's none of my business.
I am not here to be only of service to you if I then miss being to service of myself.
Yep.
So we do have more choice than we think. We don't have to do these things often. And again, as moms, as women, we've been told over and over again, we have to put our kids first. We're socialized to be people pleasers.
Right.
And
let it go.
When we slow down and said, you can't run a car and do carpool and pick everybody up if you're on empty.
Right.
So maybe it's a reframe. Maybe it is actually, I want to continue to serve these people. I want to continue to be available, but to be able to do that in a sustainable manner, I need to fill my cup.
Right. No, it's absolutely right. Absolutely right. I think it's a big mistake that a lot of people make, especially women, especially moms, because that is the role that's, you take care of everybody else first. And then when you collapse, then the whole machine falls apart.
Then nothing.
Right.
You're not going to be there for nobody. You're not going to be there for your kids. You're not going to show up at work. You're not going to be there for your partner or your, elderly parents or whoever else is relying on you. So if we're just shoring up this entire system based on one person, then let's feed that person.
That's right.
Let's make sure she's getting enough sleep. Let's make sure she's working out. Let's make sure that food that she's putting in her body is medicine and not poison.
Right.
Let's make sure her cortisol levels are manageable, because otherwise what do you end up with? Inflammation and wrinkles.
Right. And everybody around you pays the price.
Exactly.
Well. Right.
So that allowing that, and I think shifting, and for me, it's a lot when I work with my clients, it's a lot about that reframe. It's like, yes, this is what you've been told. This is what you're subscribing to. And let me offer you a different way of looking at it and see what is available to you and what are those choices that you're making.
This episode of the Life in Transition podcast is brought to you by Midlife Transition Mastery. If you have reached midlife and you are successful, you have checked all the boxes. You've done everything you thought you should do, and especially pleasing everybody else, doing what you think everyone else needs you to do. But you still feel like something's missing, like you're coming up empty, feeling alone, feeling misguided or lost. Midlife Transition Mastery Explorer community is for you. Here we will build authentic community. We will learn about the 8 steps to mastering midlife transition. And we will learn and execute living life with no regrets in our second half. Please check out the community on lifeintransition.online/MLTM, Midlife Transition Mastery. And I look forward to seeing you around the fire in this community. Right. And which the irony of the situation is by taking care of yourself better, you're taking care of everything else better around you. For sure.
Well, right. Yes. Yes.
No, it's a hard one to learn, and it's one we all need. And I can see it very clearly in my family and with my wife and kids growing up. You know, when mom went down with pneumonia because she was doing too much and not taking care of herself, and I was traveling too much, and we had 3 little kids. You know, that's not a good situation for her, first of all, but for everybody else too. Yeah. All right. So that we have that. So that's a good example of how you can focus on what it is that we can control, what can we do different, and that we really have more choices. I think there's a saying in Workaholics Anonymous, which is my 12-step of flavor of choice, that says there's nothing we have to do and nowhere we have to go. Yeah. And as some big people-pleasing corporate jet-setting executive, that was so hard for me to get. And even with my kids, right? There's nothing I have to do and nowhere I have to go. I can choose to do things. There's things that have importance. There's things that'll have consequences if I do or don't do them. Yeah. But I still don't have to.
Right. And that, right, when we take that a step further, I believe it is because so much of our idea of our value on this earth has to do with the 3 Ps. Are you performing, producing, or providing? Yeah. So when we attach our value and whether we're worthy to walk around on this earth, if we don't produce, perform, provide, then of course we're going to pour into that and then deplete ourselves in the process. So
go ahead. I love this conversation. It's great. You may be answering my question before I ask it.
It's a cultural shift, right? And, coming from Sweden, it's also Western culture. We definitely still have a capitalist society. We're still, have our status symbols, whatnot. And seeing it in the States, it's just next level.
Yes. Yeah.
So when we look at these things of like what actually will bring you enjoyment, fulfillment, I'm not calling it necessarily happiness because I don't believe that we're going to walk around and be like, super happy all the time. But when we think about contentment and a fulfilled life, it is not whether you have, 3 Porsche in your garage. It is not even whether you have a closet full of Prada bags. One Prada bag might be good and be fine. But it really comes down to the quality of your relationships. And the quality of your relationships are not attached to producing, performing, providing. So that's the fulfillment. So you'd said whether you're worthy to take up space on this earth is coming down to the 3 Ps, which I just always called, performing or being productive, as I call, which is the same thing. Mm-hmm. But what is it, just relationships, or is there something else that gives us inherent value besides the 3 Ps? Yeah, obviously. I think as far as fulfillment in life, the quality of your relationships, I'm sure you've heard of this, long-term study out of Harvard, 85 years going now, right? So we know that has been studied for a long time. And then I believe also whether you call it purpose or meaning, but how you contribute. And are the means by which you contribute in society aligned with your values? Because you
But
can
does that,
go,
and I think that's really important, but does that, like, I being a workaholic, I could very easily twist that into be the three Ps.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm still producing, I'm being useful, I'm providing for the planet needs this. And, maybe it's not my kids, maybe it is, maybe it's for the planet. But is there some human value or worth outside of the three Ps? Or do you see a differentiation between, if my purpose or what I'm working on, my production, whatever it is aligned strongly with my values and relationships? Is that what makes the difference? Like, if we say that the three Ps is the disease, what's the anecdote?
I believe slowing down is a good first place. And this has been a tough one for me. I mean, a recovering type A sitting right here, right? Former vice president of production at a major television production house in California. I was in that.
So you could be a good member in our WA community.
I could be a card-carrying member for
There's
sure.
Lots of them in California, I can tell you. Lots of meetings.
So for me, like my personal sort of revelations and coming to these conclusions is really slowing down and then being able to sit with this quite intolerable feeling and thought that if I'm not constantly moving and if I'm not constantly doing something, why am I here? What am I doing? So then writing through that, knowing that an emotion really runs through your body in 90 seconds, and then the rest is you holding on to some sort of story. So what is
a lot of wisdom in that sentence? I'm just going to let people pause on that for a second because there's a lot of wisdom in that sentence that you just said. So.
Okay, so the physiological way that emotions run through our bodies take about 90 seconds. And then after that, we usually hold on to the feeling that we experienced because we're attached to a story or some sort of outcome. So when we can tolerate sitting with this, and for me, like growing up, I got validation because I was a good person or a good girl, right? So when I produced, when I performed, I provided is how I got validation. So that's really how I thought was my value.
Which is probably true for most people.
Many, many people, especially if we look at the type A category, right? That's usually, and then if you look at the oldest daughter in any family, and check some boxes right there. So slowing down, kind of just forcing myself to sit on the couch and not do anything, not constantly being in the other moment by planning something or going backwards to see how could I have done that better, constantly evaluating or producing of some future event. What is just me?
And what did
Am
you come
I
to?
a kind, warm, generous person that people want to spend time with just because I'm me? And what of those places there's room for improvement? Where could I look and lift a couple of stones and just turn them over and say, that has some cobwebs around it. Where do I want to expand my repertoire in how I show up with people and how I connect with people? So going back to this inherent value, I believe that all humans have an inherent value, that we all bring something. And it's very easy to, in this culture or in, your family of origin, to be praised and get extra approval or validation for the pieces that serves us by going faster, faster, faster.
No, I love that. I think slowing down is a really big key, a good part of it and a good place to start. And I feel like in the first chapter of the book that I wrote to my kids, it's called Purposeful Living, Simple Wisdom for Coming of Age in Complex Times. But that first chapter is You Are Worthy. Because I think that until we understand that, as Brene Brown says, like once your worthiness and belonging is a human birthright, and once you understand that, then anything is possible. But to try to do any of the three Ps outside of that or before I understand that, is an addiction. It's a false identity. And I was very lucky to have a excruciating experience of burning down what it looks like to be the performer, provider, producer, and realized that I was still loved.
Yes. That.
Which blew my mind. Like it took me 10 years for it to sink in.
Yeah.
But at the moment I was like, my mind was like in short circuit. I couldn't figure out how my wife, who was not working, we had 3 little kids, and she's the planner and the detailed one and the worrier about the future, could love me and support me and just say, let's just have a good time, when I didn't know how I was going to pay the bills next month.
What a gift.
Yeah, it took me a while to recognize it as a gift, but it was.
And also how sad, right? That
absolutely
is not where we start from.
That's right.
That there has to be some major collisions, a major transition, a life quake to get to the point to even trust that is actually true.
Right. And that was just the beginning. I think it took me at least 10 years, if I even still know it's completely true. All right.
That, right? How much therapy do we need, right? Because right? To sit with, if I don't have this house, if I don't have this thing, if I don't show up looking a certain way, if I haven't done this, just as I am.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that helped me, I mean, that was the gift from my wife, which was amazing. I think I tell that story in one of my early episodes of the podcast, and then later, my sponsor in WAS talked to me about it. He said, how much do your dogs produce? I would say the 3 P's, but anything about 2 P's with dogs, pee and poop, right? But how much do your dogs produce?
Yeah.
So, nothing. That's a stupid question. Well, how much joy do they bring you?
Yeah.
And again, my brain's like, because I had equivalent, I always equate like you got to produce to be of value. And it's like, how valuable are your dogs, even though they don't produce anything? And then what is the biggest value you get from your dogs? And I said, well, when they're happy, when they're playing, when they're enjoying themselves, or when they're showing love and snuggling and so forth. And he said, well, what if that's the way God sees you?
Yes.
What if the way you can be of biggest service, the way you can have the most impact is just by loving your life and being happy and connecting and loving, and that's it, right? And nothing to produce.
Yeah.
And that's continued to shift, but that's why I really try to get my kids to hopefully understand that a little bit earlier than 45 or 50. That there's an inherent...
But it's this shift because it's so counter to any other message out there.
Yes. Yeah.
So to believe it then, why would I believe that now? Because you have 4 or 5 decades of being given a different message, chunk, chunk, chunk. It is ingrained. It's shifting your DNA. This is how it is. And then when we have those opportunities to reframe, to really question, to sit with, wow, this will change everything.
Yeah. And the beauty of it is when I can accept that I might have value not related to the 3 Ps, then I can also see that for everybody else. Right? As long as I'm still believing that the only value that I have is related to productivity of one form or another, then I'm also seeing everybody else through that lens to a certain extent. And therefore, there can be no actual unconditional love.
Exactly.
Because everything is a little bit connected to what do you do for me? Like, okay, I'm your dad and I love you. And then you need to go to this university, or you need to, you need to not drop a bunch of F-bombs in front of my Christian friends, or whatever the case is. Right.
There's an expectation. And I think it's interesting with unconditional love in that it doesn't mean that we don't have standards.
No, not at all.
It doesn't
Unconditional
mean
love is
that
also...
you get to treat me however, say, I love you, and then treat me like crap. It doesn't mean those things. It just means that if we start from that place, that you have this inherent worth on this earth, and we come with love, we come from love, and if that is the thoroughfare by which we travel, what a very, very different world we would have.
Yeah. And it's not codependency, it's co-commitment, right? So people talk about, if I love somebody, then I let somebody trample over me, or I enable, right? If you talk about addictions or even kids that are behaving really badly, right? No, it's not enabling. That's codependence. That's, I need you for me to be okay. I need you to be a certain way for me to be okay. It's codependence. Instead of co-committed, it's I love you. I love myself. I love you and I want what's best for you. And I'm willing to be uncomfortable, even if it means severing the relationship or whatever else, in support of what I feel is best for you. Yeah. Not because I need it, but because that's what I think is best.
Because when we have that relationship with ourselves, that we believe that we're truly worthy and we love ourselves, then we don't need it from others, right? We don't need the validation. If I look at my own story, like the shift from my addiction to, if you will, to external validation, not that long ago versus where I sit today, I'm like, yes, of course, I appreciate being appreciated.
Sure.
But that's not what fills my cup anymore.
Right.
It's not this bottomless, just keep on filling, because I know I got me.
Right. Yeah. And if it is that bottomless, then you sell your soul in the end to get that validation, whatever it is. Right. Whether it's the small, well, I'm not going to speak up for myself in my relationship with my wife or my husband because I don't want to hurt their feelings, because I don't want to lose them, or I don't want to, but that little thing of giving up.
And that, I think, is, again, going back to we have choice, right? Is so crucial, because the choice that you're making then is, are you going to have an potentially uncomfortable or challenging conversation? Or are you going to keep that discomfort within? Yeah,
and resent later.
And resent it and get frustrated. And then it leaks out all sorts of other ways because we can't actually contain it. So that's the choice that we're making.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm not particularly well equipped, or I haven't been taught how to have an uncomfortable conversation. So this is going to be hard.
Yep.
But it's going to be a whole lot harder.
Yep.
To carry it on your own.
Yeah. I love what I talk a lot about in business and coaching. I talk a lot about courageous conversations.
Yes.
Caring more about the relationship than your own comfort.
Exactly.
Right. And,
which goes back to, fulfillment in life and the role of relationships. So when we have happy, healthier relationships, our fulfillment in life goes up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. So is that what you would consider the main learning that you had out of that major transition back in your 20s? Or maybe all the ones through it?
All the ones. I think, it continues to evolve, right? Becoming a mother is a different kind of major life transition.
Yes.
And becoming a parent, changes you forever, not only in the way that you can't go back to who you were pre-becoming a parent, but as your kid grows, they will find new ways to challenge you. And they will really be able to illuminate all the stuff that you haven't worked out for yourself. So it's not this one transition, right? It's like, however your child came into your life, the first time you bring them home and you're like, oh, wow, now what? And then for the next, my oldest is 21. So for the next 21 years, there's going to be new chapters where they're going to challenge you and push your buttons. And because as long as you have buttons to push, and if you work through your buttons, there are no buttons to push.
That's right. But I would say the buttons are our responsibility.
The buttons are our responsibilities, right? Our children are not responsible for our emotional well-being.
That's right.
That's our job.
Yeah.
So whenever we get activated or triggered or whatever word you choose to use, somebody just put a big ass spotlight on something that's Hanna Bankier is for you to work on.
That's right.
This is something you haven't yet solved. And this is something that you haven't, worked through, metabolized, or found a different, more connected way or related way to express your needs. Maybe because you don't even know what your needs are, because you haven't slowed down enough to be able to identify them. Right. So in coaching, we say name it to tame it. Right. If we can't name what the problem is or what the challenge is, then we can't do anything about it.
Yes.
So being able to do that, so parenting to me is one of those major life transitions that keeps on transitioning.
For sure. And they'll go at least till they're 25, for sure.
Yes,
the major
and also because
portions.
their prefrontal cortex is not ready. So you have to actually do more of the parenting, which is an interesting part. Like when are the adults.
Right.
They start driving at 16, maybe they can vote at 18, but they can't get liquor till they're 21, and the prefrontal cortex is not done till 25. So there's a lot of different stages where you then have to adapt your parenting a lot to meet them where they're at while managing your own anxieties.
Absolutely. I think, that I get a lot of questions about parenting advice just because I've had some very interesting situations. And I said, there's not too much that I know for sure, but I know two things. One is love wins, like real unconditional love wins in the end. And two, the parent should always be the parent in the room, should always be the adult in the room.
Ideally, right?
And when you mess up, which we all do, and I do a lot, did a lot, but then we own it. That's how we stay the parent in the room, is we own it and we apologize and we make amends.
Yes.
Right? And be that example.
Holding ourselves accountable. Being able to say, you know what, kiddo, I've never done this before. I never parented you as an 18-year-old before. I never parented you as this before. I never gone through this before. Yep. I don't know. I don't have the answer. I can spit out some answer right now just to make me feel like I'm in authority.
Yeah.
Or I can slow down. I had a conversation with my oldest like that the other day, and he was like, so Mom, yes or no? And I said, well, if I give you an answer,
depends.
Yeah, but I said, if I give you an answer this very moment, the answer will be no. But I have never done this before, so I want to take a minute or two to reflect on it and really not have a reaction, but give you a response. So he said, okay, Mom, that sounds really great. How about you take a couple of days to think about it and then you get back to me? And I'm like, yeah, because right now the answer is no. But I don't even know why yet. It was just sort of a knee-jerk reaction. I don't want to give you a knee-jerk.
Right. There's some button that got pushed in there. You're not even sure what the button is.
Exactly.
Yep.
So in our relationship now, we had, him being in college, third-year student. I'm in California. He's in Massachusetts. So this idea, as you're talking about being connected with your daughter, is like, how do we keep them close when they're far away? And for us, we really have worked through this new evolved version, this new co-created version of our relationship. Because me saying just because I said so, which obviously was not my parenting style back then either, but it was definitely not be effective now at all.
Right.
And now when the kids leave is when they, for the first time, have the autonomy to set the rules for your engagement.
Yeah, and to make their own decisions on a daily life basis. And if they never had any practice, this is a problem most parents make, right? If they never had any practice making decisions for themselves, how can you expect them to make good ones all of a sudden at 18 years old in college?
Yeah.
When they have a lot of them to make. So it's really important that they get to practice, that we don't have all the answers.
We don't
say, hey, I don't know. What do you think about this one? How would you handle it?
Even if I have the answer or my version of the answer, to just ask the question, give it back to them. We're not abandoning them. We're not asking them to figure it out all on their own. But to your point, these are muscles that they need to learn how to flex. And in my case, being literally a former TV producer, right? And a type A, and very used to planning and figuring out. And I've already thought, 6 steps ahead, and being able to slow down and for me to slowly let go and stepping back and creating the space for my boys to step into it and show us like, okay, these are my values. This is how I want to show up. This is my decision-making grid. This is how I want to show up in this world. And for me, that, when it comes to Birdie launching, is such a key component in getting this other major transition as smooth as possible so you can do it with confidence and competence and not just have it happen to you.
Right. So talk to me a little bit about that. What is Birdie Launcher and what is going on there?
Oh, it's so good. So when my oldest was going to leave, and being a coach and having gone through some major life transitions on my own, I really sat with like, okay, what is this going to look like? And what is it going to mean? And let's have a plan, because everything is better when we have a plan. Doesn't mean that that's always how it's going to pan out, but we have some sort of direction. We know what's coming. We can anticipate. We can prepare. So I became, in that process, in all this deep thinking and reading up on it, became the sort of go-to Birdie launcher mama friend. And I was like, oh, lots of us have never done this before or done it well. And I
So all
wanted
of your
us
fab ladies are coming to you now, 15 years
exactly.
later or 20 years later.
Exactly. Now we're in this soup of emotion of pride and excitement and grief and loss and worry and overwhelm and feeling lonely and like, oh, wow, what now? And who am I in this when my kid's leaving? So all of that became Birdie Launcher. And I'm resisting the term empty nest, and I will share with you why. I have 3 reasons. One is, how on earth is the nest empty if I'm still in it?
Yeah, if you still have at least one person living in it, if not 2, right?
So as a mom, I'm like, now we're going back to women of a certain age, no longer reproductive age. We're no longer relevant in our society. So I'm just like the feminist in me saying, no, thank you very much. I'm very much here. I have some major juicy years ahead of me.
Absolutely.
And actually will have probably a lot more energy and time and space when my mental load is not hands-on parenting focused. So another reason is, I don't know what happens to you, but when I hear empty nest, the image that comes to mind,
it's gray and dark and
dried out,
gray
and maybe leftover feather somewhere, and that's simply not how I want to picture my home. I want my home to be full of light and life and connection and love and like a good place to go home to.
Right.
This is where I live. And then thirdly, I think that this process of Birdie Launcher starts whether you're launching your first, your last, or your only. So waiting until the last one, if you have multiple kids leaving, is really not doing it well because then you're missing out on a lot of these crucial steps that I strongly suggest need to happen long before the kids leave. So when my first one left, we started already in the fall of high school senior year. And I said, hey, kiddo, I'm going to always be your mama. You're going to always be my kid. So we're not going to be peers, but you're an emerging adult. Our relationship's going to shift and change. So what kind of version do we want to co-create together?
Right.
And he first looked at me, he's like, what are you talking about? Because, of course, I've been kind of calling the shots, right? I'm the mom, you're the kid, and this is how it is. And in this house, we use the 2-bite rule, and we do the do-over, and you take off your shoes, and it's just how it is. And I say, well, you're going to have choice. You're going to have agency. And a fear that many moms have is that their kids are leaving, and then they become irrelevant. The kids don't want to talk to you. They're not asking for your guidance. Maybe you're overbearing. Maybe you're too over controlling. Maybe you're whatever. And I didn't want that for me. I want to be close to my kids forever. So we started chewing on it. And I was like, well, I can be your consultant. I can be your sounding board, your advisor, your mentor, your coach. And he's like, definitely not coach. That's what you do for a living. I was like, fair point. So we landed at Mama Mentor. Mm-hmm. So, okay. So now I have a new title. I have a job description. And then I had to reprogram me and be able to take on that new position. Because the way I used to parent, the way I was calling the shots, the way I had already thought these things through, that was not going to serve us. And that's not what a mentor does. So starting already, in fall of his high school senior year was beautiful for both of us because it was so much easier to start making these shifts and changes and transitions while we're both under the same roof.
Right.
Because there were definitely times
because then he can practice.
Overstepped.
Yeah.
Yes, there were more than once when I overstepped and I was on autopilot and this is how I do it. And he's like, I don't think that's your role now. And I'm like, oh, you're right.
Right.
And can I then manage my own anxieties in that moment to acknowledge I have overstepped, apologize for it, own it. And then it's like, okay, so what are you thinking? Right? And then it's like, how do I manage my own anxieties around this? And letting him step up into this new version of him and in our new version of our relationship. It was super fun.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I remember just this week, my son came into my the one that launched yesterday.
Yes.
Came into my office here, And we were talking about, getting ready for the move coming up and everything. And I said, hey, I'm just really proud of you. I know you've had a lot to overcome in your life. And I'm really proud of where you've gotten to. And he said, you don't need to tell me that anymore, with no upset, even less than what I just had in my voice. Like, no upset at all. Just like that, you don't need to tell me that anymore. I know you've told me a lot. I said, so you don't need to tell me that you've had a tough time, a tough road to hoe, I always said growing up. And he said, yeah, I know that. A lot of people do. I know you've told me 1,000 times. You don't need to tell me that anymore. But just not upset, just the new roles, right? And I was so grateful. And I said, okay, great. I said, I won't. Done. Am I still allowed to tell you that I'm proud of you? And he smiled real big and said, yeah, I like that one. You can still say that. But to have even that kind of conversation, like I think about how many dads don't ever have a conversation like that with their son.
Right.
And that he feels comfortable enough, to come in my office and say that.
As a parent now is going to be different.
It's different. Right?
And you'll still be needed as a parent. That's, crucial. I have some of my moms that I work with. They're like, I won't be needed. I was like, no, college doesn't parent.
Right.
You'll be needed.
Yeah.
But it will be a different flavor. It will look different. It will feel different. And when you co-create, because you make these ideas that you have, you might have the idea that you're going to go and have lunch once a month, or you're going to call every day, or you're going to be, on Snapchat with them, or you're going to know all their friends. And they might have the idea like, bye, I'm not even coming home for, my first break. So when we don't have those conversations and we have mismanaged expectations, we set ourselves up for failure and hurt.
Yeah.
So the conversations, and then you get the guidance like, Dad, this is what I need. This is what I don't need.
Right.
Great. Thank you. Let me now give it to you, because that's easier than me like shooting darts in the dark.
No, it's important. And I didn't really have those conversations so much with my kids when they went off to college, including my oldest. But when he was leaving this time, I said, hey, how do you want it to be? What's our relationship look like going forward? And he's like, well, can I come for dinner every 2 weeks? And I'm like, yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yes.
And then I set that up, and I said, what other stuff would you like to do? Do you want to do road rallies or work on cars like we used to do, or go to a Top Golf or whatever? And he said, yeah, all of that stuff sounds good. And then he said, and I'm not a planner. So if you want to do it, it's a little bit on you to plan it, because I just don't think ahead, but at least to have that conversation and okay, this is what he'd like to do. And then if it hasn't happened in 6 months, I can't look in the mirror. I have to look in the mirror instead of say, hey, Alex, why didn't this and this happen? Right.
Yeah. What got in the way? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's beautiful to have those kinds of conversations. Looking back over all these transitions that we've talked about so far with you, is there something that you would tell your younger self? Like, is there something that you wish you had known at 22 that you would like to say to yourself at 22 now?
I think going back to these 3 Ps, if I had felt sure or convinced that I was good enough without running myself ragged, without feeling that I had to deplete myself to be able to show up for others, that my value that was so tied to my title or the size of the budgets that I was responsible for, that I was the chair of the fundraising gala at my boys' school, or like all these places that, you know what? Yes, that was awesome. And yes, you're a great producer. And yes, all of that. And even if that wasn't, you're okay.
Mm-hmm. So to really know you're okay, you have just as much inherent value as a human being, no matter how high your 3 Ps are.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's actually easier now, sitting where I am today. I would say it's easier to believe that, because of all the shifts that have taken place, right, and the amount of slowing down that I have been able to do. And it's like, oh, yeah, it's a sunny day today. I'm going to go for a walk. Yeah, right. I'm going to smell the flowers. I'm going to just be enjoying in this moment, being here now, as opposed to be so worried about the things that I can't control, where I'm sweating and I'm trying to force and make into, and I get tight, and it's just like, oh, come on, if you all just do it the way I wanted to do it. And okay, great. And that might have worked, in television, where I sit there with my budgets and my schedules, and I was like, yes, we're going to spend this much money on this and this much money. But you know what? Even in those budgets, we had a contingency.
Right.
Because you don't know.
Right.
So sitting there being so attached to the story or to the outcome that you don't flow and flex. I came to the US with a 5-year plan. Well, it's been 25 years.
Right.
So it obviously got updated and upgraded because when we get new information, we can make wiser decisions.
Yeah.
So it's not holding on to this idea that it's supposed to be in this particular way just because that's
right. No, that's beautiful. I mean, several things come to mind. One is this Eckhart Tolle, make friends with the present moment and see how your life magically transforms.
Yes.
Right. Or what my therapist tells me a lot, or try experiencing life instead of problem solving it.
Yes. What a reframe. Like, what a beautiful thing of just being here. Yes, the sun is shining. I got food on my table. I have
but to
things.
feel the sunshine, to taste the food.
Yes.
Right. Like I was going for a lunch meeting today and I was running out and I was a little bit late like I normally am because I try to put too much stuff in. And then I open the door, go out to my truck, and I'm like, 65 degrees, sunny. I'm taking the convertible. So then I have to go back in the house. I'm already late. And I never would have done this before. But I thought, no, I'm going to be 6 or 7 minutes late, and that's not cool. But it's a beautiful day, and I'm going to take the time to open the garage and dig out the convertible and take the cover off. And because this is a day that I get to experience that. And how many of those do I have left? Who knows?
Who knows? And
I had a friend my age, a classmate, die last night of a heart attack. Looks about like me, healthy, friendly, wonderful guy, 55 years old, gone from one moment to the next. So what moments?
That reminder, I had a former coworker who passed a couple of months ago, 45, like super fit, an amazing human being. And that stark reminder that we don't know the time we have left on this earth.
That's right.
Right. So like we talk about change and transition and what's known, right? There's certain things that are known. We know change will always happen, much like death, taxes, and gravity, right? Those are constant. They're not going to change. But the things that we don't know. We know
one other thing really clearly. Like what you mentioned, death, right? We know we're going to die.
Yes, but we don't know when, right?
No, we don't know when.
We have this combination.
But we pretend we're not going to because we don't know when. This episode of the Life in Transition podcast is brought to you by Transition Mastery Coaching. If you have made it to midlife and you're successful and you are going through transitions in your life, in your business, in your career, or in your organization, and you are looking to master those transitions, to make the most of them, to accelerate into the next phase of your organization or your life, if you're facing challenges in your business, challenges in your relationship, challenges in your health, and you really want to transition those quickly, I'm here to guide you for that. And I look forward to working with you. And you can sign up for either Pinnacle Transition Coaching or Summit. Please go to lifeintransition.online/MLTM and scroll to see the Summit and Pinnacle Coaching, or reach out to me directly on my email, art@artblanchford.com. And I look forward to connecting with you and helping you to accelerate your transitions to achieve what it is that you want to achieve in the second half in your organization and in your life, so you can live your whole life with no regrets.
So we have this idea that the time that we have left on this earth is unknown, combined with life is fragile, equals do it now.
Right. That was the message in my reflection time this morning after I saw the passing of my friend. I was like, there's a lot of stuff that I'm working on sort of, and I want to do. I shouldn't say working on. It's like hike the AT, right? Mm-hmm. And things like this that have been on my plate for a while that I really want to do, or drive the convertible when it's nice weather, right? And you never know when you have another chance to do that. So it's,
and our lives is really the days, how we spend our days is how we live our lives.
Absolutely.
So if we don't enjoy the sunshine or we don't take the convertible, then that was your life.
Yeah, exactly. There's a quote, and I don't know who said it. I'm sure I read it somewhere, but I had it on my computer forever. But it says, a happy life is merely a succession of happy moments, present moments. And it's like happy is like, emotions come and go, but present life is merely a succession of present moments. But most people forgo the happy moments in pursuit of a happy life.
Yes, that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. if you never get there, wherever the hell there is, whatever there is, if you never get there, if you've enjoyed the moments, you still have a happy life. And if you happen to get there, you still have really no idea whether it's going to affect your happiness or not.
To me, then, that really goes back to this idea of the importance of those quality relationships. Mm-hmm. Because you may never get that big house or the convertible or those other things. And we get so caught up in the materialistic and on the check boxes. Like, you know, the number of moms now, they're like, oh, Hannah, I can't even think about this major transition until my kid has picked which college he's going to go to. Or until...
Which is such a lie that we get into about college with ourselves right now.
Which
Holy
also,
cow.
I'm like, yes, I hear that you are so caught up in this decision that I assume you're making as a family, because it's a big investment, and you want to set your kid up for success. And whether your kid is going to go to community college down the street or to the other side of the country doesn't shift or change these things. These things you still need to tend to, but it's easier for us to not tend to the relationships, to the emotional, or actually I have to grow a little bit or maybe shift and change.
It's uncomfortable.
And instead, I'm going to say, oh, here's the checklist, and they have the shower caddy, and then I did the bedding, and then we got that. And I'm not at all negating the importance of the practical, especially as we model that behavior for our kids. Right. So like, here are the things you're going to need to eat. So, you know, what's the meal plan? Like, what are you going to do?
But here's the thing about the practical things. And this is a question I often give myself. The practical things will always work themselves out.
Yes.
Right. They're not going to starve. They'll figure that out. Right. If they get hungry enough, right. So, you know, it's the things that aren't the practical things. It's the relationship things. It's the health things from the long term. Like I always ask myself, like, if I don't do my exercise today, when will I? Well, wait a minute. It's today's exercise. If I don't do it today, I can't do it again. Nope. If I don't, change the oil in my car, I can still do that tomorrow.
Yes.
And it will come, you know, the light will come on and start screaming at me, and I'll be more likely to do it. But there's no light coming on to tell me to take time with my daughter to read together today, or to tuck her in, or to, you know, take care of my exercise for today. Yep. And it's the same thing. So the practical things will have a way of working themselves out because there's other systems that will push on those. And hunger is a pretty good motivation. Right.
And that again goes back to this. We have choice.
Yes.
But it's easier to not tend to those things, and it's easy to focus on the practical, and we can check it off with a little box, and you can see like, oh, I did it or I didn't do it, versus how am I going to have this conversation with my kid that about our changing relationship that I definitely don't want to wait till the night before moving in, because that's going to be emotional and fraught moment anyway. And you're probably going to go to moving in with a bunch of Kleenex and do all sorts of things, right? I told my oldest, I was like, kiddo, I'm going to cry, and that's just how it is. And if that's going to be embarrassing to you, then now I will give you 3 months warning. So you get to deal with it. Let's talk about a way that's going to work for both of us. But I'm not going to not show my emotion.
That's right.
All right. And I want to here are the things that we can start doing now. And we need to have some of these conversations multiple times. It's not a one and done.
Yeah.
But then we don't know. So it's also about, again, that flexibility. We're not pouring concrete here. We're going to try something, and then we get to see, hey, is this working for you? I actually want to talk to you more often.
Right.
I miss you terribly. So this, you just responding K to my text messages. Can I get a complete sentence? Right. You know, or like, I'm worried about this thing, or when I don't hear from you, and I'm going to be worried that you're making it to class. I'm going to be worried that you're out partying, and I'm going to worry that you don't make friends. And I'm going to worry about these things. So here are the things. Again, you're not responsible for my emotional well-being. And since this is a co-created relationship full of mutuality and care for each other, here are the things.
Right. Yeah. If you could respond within 24 hours to a text message, so I know you're not dead.
Yes.
Because that's where my mind goes, or whatever the case is. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, I know all those things very well. If you were, and I'll let you put this in whichever area that you want, but and I think about the 3 areas, you know, you had a young person coming over to a new country and starting over. It was a really impactful transition for you. Yes. And then you also have this, you know, Birdie launch, right? Getting the birds to fly, right? If somebody's finding themselves in one of those situations, or maybe becoming a new mom, or struggling with who they are afterward, what's one tool that comes to mind for you, Hanna, that anybody could hit pause on this podcast right now and implement? That could really, something small, something simple, but also can really make a difference for them. What's one thing that you would recommend if someone's going through one of these significant transitions that they can put into place today, right now?
There are a couple of things that come to mind. One that will take more than 5 minutes for sure is really creating a plan. Because when we go through these major transitions, there's the framework that I use when I work with my clients, which is the grief. What are the losses? What are the things, your identity or the place or whatever, your relationship that's changing? There's a tremendous sense of loss and grief there. So to create space for that. And then go into the relief. Like, what is the things you're not going to miss, right? So when these kids, like dirty socks on the floor, slamming doors, maybe some attitude that you weren't asking for, carpools, or not being able to go to bed because you haven't heard them walk in the door yet. And then turning to the joy. What are like the opportunities that are coming with this change?
So make a plan in those 3 parts for grief,
getting a plan
relief.
There, but probably starting, in a sense, a lot of what we've talked about art also is about shifting identities. Yeah. So one exercise that I do with all my coaching clients, moms or otherwise, it's really to take a blank piece of paper, put your name in the middle, and then put around it all the different identities that you identify with. So I'm a mom, I'm a sister, I'm a partner, I'm an immigrant, I'm a business owner, I'm a dancer, I'm a hiker, I'm a community builder, I'm a fab lady, like all of those things, whatever comes into mind.
Right.
And then you take 2 different color markers. So maybe here, like I happen to have a purple and a green one, and I take maybe the green one. So all the things where I get energy. Mm-hmm. So I get energy from dancing. I get energy from showing up and being a fab lady. So all of those I circle in green. And then I look at like, what are the places that are draining my energy? And I circle those places. And then I look and do a quick little assessment. Okay, where now do I want to start focusing my time and my energy, which is limited resources, and get my cup filled?
Right.
So that's a good place to start, because then you realize, like, what are the next steps that you can take to get more of that to fill your cup?
Yeah.
So that's a quicker one than the bigger, but everything else, I would say everything is better and easier with a plan, because we don't feel as lost. We don't feel as overwhelmed. We know what the next step is. And then there's the next step and there's the next step. And then we usually get better outcomes and we get more of what we want.
Oh, that's beautiful. I mean, I think that's really true. And for all of you planners out there, it doesn't mean you have to, not planners, it doesn't mean you have to stick with the plan. Right?
No,
Eisenhower
the plan will evolve
planning
and change and move and groove.
But planning is everything. Plans are nothing, really. I mean, you adjust them as you go, but the process is really important. So
having a framework, because that you worry less. So you can feel more confident and competent. So you can go through this transition with greater ease and grace. That's what I want.
And I love the identity exercise too. I'm going to have my it's usually a first Friday meeting with my wife, but it's actually my second Friday tomorrow of the month because of a lot of other things going on. But I think I might use that one. I think that's a great one to look at. I mean, I was just thinking you could also apply that to relationships. We talked about how important relationships are, but which ones are giving me energy?
Yes.
Which ones are not giving me energy?
Yes.
Right? Or I feel like are draining me. Right.
Yeah. Because that's how, again, how you spend your days is how you spend your life.
Yeah.
So what do you choose to invest in?
Oh, those are really good. Yeah. So have a plan. And then if you want a small process to start with, look at what your identities are and see which ones are life-giving and which ones are energy draining.
Yes.
Awesome. Hanna, last question. Where can people find out more about you if they want to connect with you and get some more detail on these wonderful ideas that you have?
For the insights, the wisdom, and the practical next steps. So Birdie Launcher is my website, Birdie with a Y. birdielauncher.com. And then I have a free guide for your audience, which is really helping people get going on this shifting the parenting, whether it's from mama to mama mentor or whatever job title you and your kid will co-create for you. And you can find that at Birdie Launcher /free offer. And then obviously find us on Instagram and Facebook as well. Birdie with a Y, Launcher.
Awesome. I look forward to it. It's very perfect timing for me. I'm looking to go check out that reference for myself here, as my wife and I are starting into that with our time together tomorrow afternoon to plan the next phase for ourselves as well.
Yes, such an exciting time.
It is. It is. Mm-hmm. Hanna, thank you so much for your wit and your wisdom, and obviously your language has caught up to you. You have a good humor now and know what to say at the right time, and I really appreciate it. One last question for you. Are you a left coaster or a right coaster in Sweden? East or a west?
Oh, I'm from Stockholm, so
okay.
I'm east.
So you're from the big brother. You always look down on the guys from Gothenburg a little bit. You know?
Yes, but they have the best accents, so we love them.
Yeah, no, I worked for a company that was founded in Gothenburg, headquartered in Stockholm. So there was always this big brother, little brother thing going on for a long time. So, well, with that, thank you so much. I really appreciate your humor and your wisdom and how you're giving back and helping being a model for many, many people and everyone listening today. So thank you very much, Hanna.
Thank you so much for a beautiful conversation, Art. I appreciate it.
I can't wait to hear what action you are taking. Connect with me on LinkedIn or our website, lifeintransition.online, and let me know. Let a friend know too. It could be a huge encouragement to them and keep you on the track. Thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and it would mean a lot to me if you left a review and shared this episode with a friend. If you want to learn more about me and what I do when I'm not podcasting, please visit me at artblanchford.com. Thank you for listening. Together, let's make the most of life in transition.